Welcome back to the Morning Show here on the Raj News. I am Adesola Omorwan.
And I'm Rufai Hosseini. There's no overstating how the rise in poverty incidence has trailed economic growth in most developing countries, where noticeable economic growth rates lead to negligible improvement in the welfare of the masses. According to reports, the economy shifted into a lower gear in the first quarter of 2019, with the annual growth moderating from the over 3-year high lodged in the fourth quarter of 2018. So joining us to discuss this more is former presidential candidate and renowned economist Tope Fasua, and was presidential candidate of Abundant Nigeria Renewal Party, to talk about the economic outlook in the next 4 years in Nigeria.
Good morning. Welcome to the show.
Good to be here. Good morning.
Good morning, Tope.
Right.
Tope, let's break it down. Let's look at the economic indices stacked against us. Mounting debt rate in Nigeria, although some people will still say debt to GDP ratio is still something you can look at. Some good signs came out recently. Growth in export, 2.4%. Some people say that's still good. But only in the newspapers this morning, screaming headlines, 1.7 trillion taken out of the economy by foreign investors because they say there's no security. And we know that markets run on the fuel of sentiment.
Yes, it does, yeah.
Is the sentiment bullish for Nigeria?
No, it's not. I mean, unfortunately not. There was this Forbes article recently also that said, if you want to lose money, go to Nigeria. I mean, how bad can it be? You know, the same Forbes, there was one time some people were quoting a certain mysterious Forbes article that Nigeria was the fastest growing economy in Africa or something of that sort. Of course, the sentiments are not bullish, and that should worry everybody. It's become a bit trite for us to even go through some of the indices. You know, when you're growing at 2.01% and your population is growing at 3.2%, in fact, you have to add that to the inflation rate, because that means that the value of money is reducing. So if inflation is doing 11.2% and, you know, population growth at 3.2, that's 14.4%. Back out 2.01%, you are in a negative territory. We're in negative growth of at least 12%. That's it. You know, we're not talking about the misery index now, which would have added unemployment and all that. Let's leave all of that. The point is, we should be concerned with the value of money that's depreciating at 11.2% year on year. And also, we should be concerned about the population growth. And so the GDP is not growing near enough to cater for the people and to also compensate for the loss of value. You know, so those are the two things that should concern us actually right now, before we start putting, you know, stuff about interest rates.
But are you concerning ourselves with that?
Well, unfortunately, you know, we're hoping that we're going to get a few people into the next cabinet who have some economic thoughts. You know, you don't have to be particularly, you don't have to have studied economics or have a PhD in economics. It depends on how you think, you know, and, you know, according to Maynard Keynes, there was a time I was looking for, who exactly is an economist? What does an economist do? And, you know, though I studied economics at BSc level, but the only definition I saw was from Maynard Keynes in 1924. And this is what he wrote about Alfred Marshall, I think, who was his boss, you know, at the funeral of Alfred Marshall, and said, an economist is someone who concerns himself with every specter of human engagement. You know, you have to be a mathematician, you have to be a historian, you have to be a writer, you have to be a communicator, you know, and, you know, basically, long and short, an economist is someone who never stops asking questions, and you're able to populate your models with as many variables as possible, as many, you know, explaining variables as possible. Well, you know, unfortunately, what we didn't see in the last 4 years was we didn't see anybody of sort. You know, I mean, at best we had someone like Kemi Adeosun coming in and out.
Was she?
You know, she wasn't an economist, of course she wasn't.
So, again,
Rufai, what I was saying earlier is, look, I'm even ready to give that leeway to say you don't have to have studied economics. But how do you think? You know, but you're thinking about a certain narrow manner. Even if you have a PhD in economics, you are a non-economist. You are not a master economist.
But let me come in here, because
so we need master economics.
You once proposed growing the economy at least by 15%. I remember your manifesto for the presidential election. You said 15%, very ambitious, for the current realities we have with us. I mean, 2.1% for the first quarter of 2019, highest, strongest we've seen in recent times. So what exactly are we doing wrong? And what sort of fiscal policies will help us grow in subsequent quarters.
Absolutely. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. It's about the fiscal policy. But you see, the first thing we're not doing right is that we're not thinking right. We're not imagining. We're not visioning right. So when I say we can grow at 15%. It's about, like they say, when you aim for the star, for the moon, sometimes you find yourself among the stars. I'll tell you, within Africa here, we've got Senegal growing at 8%, Cote d'Ivoire at 8%, Ethiopia at 7%, Ghana nudging 6%, within Africa. I've not left Africa, all right, and then when you talk about an economy like India at 7%, a 3 trillion economy, the US economy at 4.2%, a 20 trillion economy, the Chinese economy at about $15 trillion economy growing at 6.3%. Now, if you look at 15 trillion economy growing at 6.3%, you're adding about $900 billion to the economy every year, which is almost three times Nigeria's economy. Meaning that China is adding 3 times Nigeria's economy every year. The US is adding 2 of Nigeria's economy every year. We should be ashamed of ourselves. I mean, we come here, we talk about being the so-called giant of Africa, the giant that can't think with clay feet. You know what I'm saying? I mean, look, for how long can we continue to play the horse ostrich, Now, that said, what fiscal policies? Because again, we don't have much of a problem with monetary policy in Nigeria. Everybody talks about it. Not much of a problem. I'll tell you this. The reason why I said that is because we've actually used all our monetary policy bullets, right? There's a limit to what you can do with interest rates, with inflation. I don't believe we should be targeting inflation. I believe that, look, we should actually begin to think about, we let inflation grow at the expense of growth, in favor of growth. So growth is what we should be targeting, 15%. If you end up at 10%, great. What kind of fiscal policies? Yes. The fiscal policy is where we have failed, for example. So we're saying that we need a lot more money in this economy. When I talk about $15 trillion, when I talk about 15% growth and, at least about a 15 trillion budget or so, I also talked about that. That presupposes that we need to be able to fund this budget. We've got the money in this economy. I was in Ghana about 2 months ago. And when we went to book a restaurant in Osu, by the time we were given the bill, we had 1% on the bill. We had 1% tourism levy. We had 2.5% GET fund, that is Ghana Education Tax Fund. We had 2.5% NHI National Health Insurance Levy, and we had 12.5% VAT in a restaurant in Ghana, and we paid. And here we are, we've got a scenario where, because the so-called big men in this country don't want to pay anything, we've got a mentality about riding for free, here we are. We're not getting the bang for the buck. We're not getting as much money as we can get from this economy. We had a scenario where, look, for example, cigarettes and alcohol are the cheapest in Nigeria than anywhere else in the world. You know what I'm saying? They were about to add about, in 2017 under Adeosu, they brought in the IMF. They did a review of the tax policy of this country. They mentioned the fact that, you guys can get a lot more from excise duties on these things, But the moment they were even attempted to push it and see what they could do, LCCI came up and said, no, it's going to kill industry. MEN said, look, we've got to have a point where we actually stamp our feet on the ground and do what is needful. This country, right, if you say that you have the largest economy in Africa, $420 billion or $450 billion, depending on where we find ourselves, we can definitely generate a lot more liquidity from this country, from within ourselves. Forget about, foreign capital, to organize ourselves. The more we organize ourselves, the more money we make for this economy. The higher the budget and the better for our people.
So Tope, I want to come in here. You said we don't have a monetary. I believe we have a monetary policy. I'll give you this analysis. We're talking about Kemi Adesina the other time, how she can stamp her foot down. But we forget that there are 2 economists in this country. The perception of certain people higher and the economic minister perception. Why did I say that? When the IMF gave us our recommendation that we should float the Naira, let the Naira lose its value a little bit, we dilly-dalled on that. Some people in some quarters believe that a strong economy is a strong currency. And I'll give you also an instance. All these economies you've cited, Japan, China, and all these countries, if you remember in 1985, something happened, the Plaza Hotel Agreement. All these economies deliberately reduced the value of their currency for export and trade analysis. So they grew because the renminbi in China was lower. The yen in Japan was lower until 1985 when America sat them on the table in the Plaza Hotel in New York and said, okay, let's review this agreement. You must not manipulate currency. But we had a case to be able to shut that down leading up to what will have a bigger market now with AFTA, we had a case to be able to shut our currency down. We had a fine opportunity under the IMF, but some people in some quarters told the economy minister, we must keep a currency afloat. We must keep a strong currency afloat. And you say we don't have a monetary policy.
No. Listen, like I said again, what you can do is, look, you've only had, in monetary policy, you have only a few bullets you can shoot. When you shoot all the bullets, you can only float. I mean, you know why? I mean, for 24 months, right, we kept all the monetary policy indices at the same point. MPR was at the same, 24 months, about 6, what am I saying? How many meetings was that? You know what I'm saying? Every 12 meetings, they couldn't do anything until recently. And even at that, what we have is not quite a salutary movement. Now, I actually would say, though, that we need to be a bit careful in terms of devaluation of currency because, our realities are a little bit different. I've read somewhere where Margaret Thatcher said to the British, some of the British businessmen in Asia, that according to Lenin, I think, John Lenin, or Stalin, Joseph Stalin or someone, that if you want to debauch a country, first of all, go after its currency, debauch its currency. So now that is a reality. Like, what does devaluation do to a country? A country that's not producing, that depends so much on foreign goods, is that it deprives the majority of your people from access to basic goods. Now, if you are going to devalue, you've got to have a deliberate policy. You have to show that policy clearly about how you're going to be a lot more productive and provide for your people, especially the basic essentials that they need. Because what we have seen since 1984, 85 to 86, thereabouts, in the Babangida days, is that we have a one-way downward slope in the value of the currency of this country. So what do you have to do? So the analysis needs to be a lot more robust. We've got to see how we're going to be able to produce stuff ourselves. You cannot, you see, the worst thing you do for yourself is to devalue your currency and open your economy. Right? When you devalue, that means that at the end of the day, all your money is going to be heading abroad. But if they're not able to, over time, ensure that we manufacture a lot of the things that we need for ourselves, we've got to actually sit on the table and agree with some of these guys asking us to devalue and say, okay, what are you going to do to assist us to be able to produce for ourselves so that, okay, at the end of the day, we can coast. Because otherwise, we've got a phenomenon going on right now. A lot of the guys that are asking for devaluation are also people who have taken a short position on the Naira. These guys have taken a position that the Naira will devalue, and they're going to cash out at the back end.
Let me get you back on this. It's not today we've been shooting on our monetary policy bullets. If you remember, cast your back 25th January 1986. This was when all of the currency went down in Nigeria.
Right.
There had been debates throughout 85 into floating the currency before Babangida did finally say, you know what, let's float, let's let it out. And in the space of January 86 to about September 86, we deployed over 8 different monetary policies. Remember, we did the interbank, we did FX movement, we did currency swap. Between those 6 months, and the value kept on going. You remember the first promise was, if you allow the currency float, from 1 to 1, it will be 3 Naira to the dollar. Yeah. After the first week it floated, it went to 7 Naira to $1.
Right. Economic history.
Economic history there. So, what are we talking about here? Is there any
let me tell you what. I remember in 1986, was a teenager, but we were reading these things in the newspaper and all that. And the idea was, the moment you devalue your currency, you're going to be able to export more and get more Naira for whatever it is you were exporting. Because if you had a product like crude oil selling at $60, today $60, let's say, for example, $60, multiplied by 305, that's 18,300 Naira. That's what you're going to get. But if you were multiplying at 700 Naira, $60 becomes about 42,000 Naira, which you're going to be able to use to do whatever. Though it's an illusion. At the end of the day, your currency will only be really strong depending on how much production you do and what they call economic complexity in terms of what value are you adding to the goods that you're selling. If you're just selling things like crude oil and you're importing, mind you, you're going to have to import petrol on the other side and diesel on the other side. You're just basically, being penny wise and pounds foolish. There's one thing called the Marshall-Lerner condition. The Marshall-Lerner condition says that if you're going to play that devaluation game, you have to be sure, for one, at least I remember, remember that your product has to be price elastic, meaning that if you are going to devalue and you're selling crude oil, it must be that because your crude oil has now become cheaper for people, from the other side to buy, then they're going to buy more from you. Now, however, and also you must be able to set the price. Unfortunately for us, the product that we sell the most is crude oil. We don't have any impact on the price setting, on the price discovery of crude oil. And secondly, the fact that your naira is now cheaper does not bring more people here to buy from, because the products are all there. There's a limit to what you can produce as per OPEC and what have you. So I would say that we need a much more robust economic discussion. We need to put a lot more things on the table, and we need to tell ourselves some truth going by the history of what we've done in the past.
And talking about truth, we'll come back after this break to talk some more. Join us, Kate. Great to have you back here on the morning show on the Raj News. We still have with us economist and former presidential candidate Tope Fasua. Thank you for staying with us. You talked about the ability to think and, having the mind, economic, fiscal policies. Right. Let me just get your opinion on what was said over the weekend. There was a roundtable session for private sector operators where the CBN governor was present. He says in present-day Nigeria, it is impossible to have a low interest rate regime, a stable exchange rate regime, low inflation rate, and low unemployment at the same time. Yeah. Do you agree with him?
I do, actually. It's basically a trilemma, what they call the unholy trinity in economics. And of course, in the work of central bank, one of them has to escape. Yeah, you can't hold down inflation, hold down the exchange rate, and hold down interest rate at the same time. You've got to let go of one. And all of these things, they interact. You know what I'm saying? So what have we done now? Okay, so Naira is where it is, but also there's a bit of pressure on us to devalue. It's coming from very important quarters and so on. Even the central bank itself knows. The consolation is they've got about 45 billion on reserves, but that's not enough. I mean, Algeria has over 250 billion on reserves, even Libya. And these are all oil companies, oil countries as well. So it's clear that you can't hold all of these three down at the same time. You've got to make a choice. So now, if you want low interest rates, all right, what is likely going to happen is, okay, it's going to have effect on inflation running away. Assuming, of course, that the moment you reduce interest rate, more people will go to the bank and the bank to lend. Though it doesn't follow. That's the thing about Nigeria, that a lot of those principles don't follow in Nigeria. The fact that you bring interest rate down doesn't mean that the banks are going to lend. If the banks are not in a position to lend, they will not lend. For example, we've got a problem with increasing NPLs right now, non-performing loans. The other time I saw a figure of 8.1 trillion. The other time I saw it was 1-point-something trillion, whatever it is, but the banks are a little bit worried. Of course, we are very great. The other time I actually had to comment that our banks seem to have become quite adept at losing money. And that's quite worrisome.
But they are investing in bonds and government securities.
Yeah, of course, that's a safe haven.
Instead of lending.
Because again, if you look at it, our credit culture in this country is not kosher at all. We don't have a good credit culture. On the one hand,
don't have one at all.
Oh well, I think we have one is bad. People believe that when they go to banks and take money, it's part of their national cake, and everybody can walk away with it. elsewhere, even if you're a big company, if you mess up on your credit, you're in serious trouble, serious trouble. And if you mess up on your personal credit, you know, that's those people you see sometimes living on the streets, that's what happened to them. Here, what's the consequence?
Let's talk about
you know, to a large extent, I agree that you are not good. So I believe, my belief is that, look, we shouldn't worry so much about interest rates for now.
Okay.
Where they are, it's okay. You know, of course, I may be too worried about the margin between the lending and the deposit rate. You know, but the banks explain all sorts of things, and a lot of money, a lot of the funds that are kept in banks are sterilized, and liquidity ratio, cash reserve ratio, and all of that. You know, that's fine. What I think we should target is growth. Okay, if we are more aggressive on the growth end, they to compensate for whatever is happening with interest rate and inflation. We shouldn't equate ourselves with those countries that are plateaued in terms of their growth. We're not the United States of America. We're not UK. We're not UK.
But America is even growing.
Exactly. And we're talking about those guys growing at 4.2% in America. You know, it's a shame.
So let's talk about economic growth and economic direction, starting with the 2019 budget. Is this financial prudency, looking at the disparity from 2018 to 2019, and what sort of impact will that have on economic growth?
I think it's financial illiteracy.
Not prudency.
And economic illiteracy, both. Financial and economic illiteracy is the reason why you reduce your budget from 9.1 trillion, okay, in absolute terms, to 8.9 trillion. Okay, despite the fact that there's inflation of 11%, meaning that 8.9 trillion is effectively maybe 7.7 trillion. So why would you reduce your budget from 9.1 trillion to 7.7 trillion? Why again would we have a scenario where most of that budget never gets, you know, affected, as it were? You know what I'm saying? You know, so it's a joke. Mainly the fact that you've got a population that's growing, more mouths to take care of. About 5 to 6 million people are added to our country every year. All right, so which we need to prepare for. You know, again, it's not aggressive. Even if we look at the ERGP, sounds like another budget document. You can't see the punch. You can't see the factor. You know, you can't see that these guys are angry and are ready to do something different and something very different.
Let me check you on the ERGP.
I mean, ERGP is doing about the projections are 3.5%.
So let me check you on the ERGP. Yeah. I mean, I read the document, about 138 pages document, and I read it in and out, and I kept on seeing, we will do this, but I didn't see a lot of hows. Exactly. I want you to talk us through, you know, the possibility of hows and some of those things. And I also want you to look at our budget in consonance with other countries in Africa. We play big brother. Kenya, for instance, has a way larger budget than Nigeria.
No, not particularly, not so much larger, but hey, for a 50 million population, they did $29 billion last year. You know, and we can't do $29 billion this year.
And another part I want us to look at here in this conversation is the purchasing power parity. So I'll give you quick instances. Our budget in 79 into 80, 81, 82, when Shagari was here, was about 25 billion US dollars.
Yes,
our budget now is still 25 billion. The state allocation to your state as at 83, 84 was 25 million naira. That was like $24 million. And that's 9 billion naira in today's money. But the state allocation now to us is about 4 billion, you know. So when you look in terms of purchasing power parity eroding, what would you like to say to policymakers in this country?
Well, what that tells you is that actually, when I did that analysis around the budget, around the campaign period, what occurred to me is that, you know, as we were devaluing, we're actually devaluing the lives of the people. You know, that those who could afford milk before can't afford anymore. You know, especially because you're not producing milk yourself. You still have to depend on WAMCO or something. You know, if you had a way of actually producing the milk yourself and producing the things that people need. I mean, that's why Bill Gates had to come here to tell us that our children are malnourished, you know, and that we need to, you know, we need to add more effort in developing those children, because the more they become malnourished, their brains shrink. And, you know, I mean, there was a World Bank Human Capital Index that came out last year. 34%. Nigeria was 34%. Nigeria was about fifth to the last. We're only better than South Sudan, than Mali, than Niger, Chad. You know what I'm saying? You know, and what that 34% says is that, you know, that any child born in Nigeria today, you have an average of 34% opportunity or chance of actually achieving what you need to achieve for the country, of, you know, your full potential for the country, and that's a shame. You know, if you look at, so this year I went and checked South Africa's budget. So South Africa did a 3-year budget this year, you know, 5.8 trillion rand. You know, it came to about $405 billion, right? You know, so divide that by 3, about $135 billion per year. That's the budget of South Africa.
So
Even though someone that told me, I think it was Femi Falana did, called me and said, you know what, there's also this problem whereby, some of these parastatals, NNPC, CBN and co, their budgets are not inside this budget, but it really doesn't matter. So as I'm concerned, South Africa as well may not have put in the budgets of those organizations there. That's it. Listen, the budget for South Africa on education alone for 1 year is $30 billion. $30 billion, which is our entire budget for the entire year. That's why we're running to University of Witwatersrand, we're running to University of Cape Town, we're running to all of these places, and you know where they are, where they stand on the chart.
Let's talk about the way forward. We kind of talk about this gamut of challenges and then talk about the way forward. Funding the 2019 budget, you've mentioned it earlier, but I would like you to advise, because when you look at what the government is proposing, you have taxation that has its own limitation. You have others, which includes recovery of loot. Not sustainable.
That's not sustainable.
You have oil, which we do not really call the shots on prices of oil. So there's a lot of challenges. And then the IMF just came out last week, raising alarm about rising debt of emerging economies like Nigeria. Even though our Minister of Finance has said, you know what, there's no cause for alarm. We are within the threshold. What is the way forward? How do we fund the 2019
budget?
All,
the first way forward is that you guys should have elected me in February, but you didn't, because so you're stuck with those people you elected, But
we didn't get to vote.
You didn't get to vote. That's always an excuse from you guys in the media, But that said, the point is that look, there's a lot of leeway. You see,
if we had elected, what would you have done?
Sorry.
If we had elected you, what would you have done?
Well,
Tell
that's
us
what I'm
now.
saying. Listen, first of all, I'm a communicator. I'm a motivator. Listen, the role of a leader is to get the followers to do that which they don't want to do and get them smiling while doing it. That's it. You have to be able to motivate them and talk to them and actually show example. I mean, unfortunately, what we're stuck with is a taciturn leader. Who left to me, I think that all of the ministers that were there before will come back. Just taciturn, he doesn't speak that much. That's what it means. But basically, I mean, he left to him, all of those guys will come back, and all of that. So how do we, now, what is due to government is not only taxes. What is due to government is taxes, rates, duties, levies, fines, fees. So there's a whole gamut of options that are open to government, now you have to be serious about getting what's supposed to come to you. But you have to be able to, first of all, paint the picture of where we're supposed to be going. Look, in fact, let me tell you what, if nothing works, you have to be able to let people know that, look, if countries like South Africa can do this, we should be able to do that. Because we're not abnormal. We're human beings as well. We need to begin to get serious. Angola is budgeting $39 billion this year. That's why the fact that they devalued their currency almost 50% last year. But the dollar equivalent of their budget for this year is $39 billion for 29 million people, 25 million people. You know what I'm saying? And here we are. So look, we don't have to get all of the. We know that we're in serious trouble. When you talk about even the issue of, so first, I'll talk about the debt, but look at all of this gamut of options for government to make money. And it's all about government actually organizing itself. And there was a story I used to tell back in time that, when APC did their first and only economic summit in May or so, or April of 2015, when it just came in. I was there in the Hilton, and it was question time. We're in plenary, and they recognized the lady in front of me. And when she's a white woman, she said, "Listen, you guys are complaining you can't fund your budget. This is the only country I've been to, and I've been to a few countries where nobody gets fined for overspeeding. How then do you intend to fund your budget? We know a country like the UK. How do they fund their budget? They've got a bit of oil in North Sea. But hey, they organize their society, and people pay their way." And they're able to fund their budget with that. And that's how it is. So there's a lot of opportunities for government. Listen, VAT, for example. I mean, I just give you an example about Ghana. The other time, there was a bill on tourism that was stepped down by the president himself. And you wonder, why can we not have a bill on tourism where people who lodge in hotel pay 1,000 naira and it goes to the tourist? You've taken care of that one, or people who are traveling in and out of the country. But why? So you see, the lack of imagination and the refusal to think about that where we are today is not ideal and we need to move elsewhere. That, unfortunately, it is true. In fact, the shocking thing was the former DG of DMO, Professor Dr. Nwankwo, was in a meeting recently, and he said that our debts are unsustainable and problematic. I said, wow. He defended that debt level until he left there 2 years ago. So certainly the debt is not sustainable. I'm not advocating for more debt.
Okay, thank you so much, Tope. Really appreciate you for your time, and we'll go on a quick break. We'll come back.
Great to have you back on the morning show here on the Rise News. Economist and former presidential candidate Tope Fasua is still with us in the studio. Mr. Tope, Mr. Fasua, we have to keep you a little bit longer because unfortunately our second guest has just cancelled on us. But we have a lot to talk about. I know you were rushing through the points of what to do and funding the 2019 budget. We talked about the available options, and it seems like the government is fixed on taxation. However, that has raised a lot of debates. Do you increase the VAT? Do you widen the tax net? What exactly should they do?
Actually, the government is not even fixated on taxation. The government is still fixated on crude oil. In fact, the last analysis I heard, I think from CBN governor, was talking about, you know, the effect of shale on our budget and all. And I don't think we should begin to, I think we should actually move away from that. If we were wise, we should actually sterilize the entire crude oil thing, you know. Of course, you know about that analysis of, you know, I mentioned a barrel of crude oil at 60 is 18,300. You know, at 70 is barely 21,000 naira. You know what I'm saying? You know? So and then how many barrels are we getting? And how many people are plugged into that process?
And most of our crude
and what kind of taste do we have? Exactly. Sometimes I hear that, and you know, it's scary. You know what I'm saying? But hopefully, I mean, at the end of the day, most of them get sold. But the kind of taste we have developed, you know, it doesn't actually match what's on ground. You know, so there's a need to actually rearrange. Of course, in accounting, two ways of making money is either you reduce your costs or increase your revenue. So there's also a need to reduce the cost of governance. You know what I'm saying? And everybody knows that. You know, we haven't actually seen that level of asceticism from the presidency, you know, especially. I mean, someone commented that on inauguration day, the president went in a new Maybach or something or the other. The man actually, he likes his good things, doesn't he? You know what I'm saying? But also, he's not setting that pace to let us know that we're in austere times, beyond actually telling the people that they have to suffer a little bit more, you know. But hey, we want to see that you guys are also suffering at the leadership level, so that will now dovetail and people will believe your story about, you know, the need for them to suffer and all of that, you know. So yeah, but there are very many ways, many avenues that we can explore. You see, what we need to do is actually sit and itemize them. For example, you know, the FRS says that they made 5.3 trillion naira last year, and this is the biggest numbers we've made, which is actually, you know, I mean, they were just playing to the gallery as far as I'm concerned. Our FRS should be targeting 15 trillion minimum.
From this economy?
Absolutely. You know, the FRS should be targeting 20.
In the world.
Listen, we should be targeting. You know, mind you, there's also an Oxfam report that says we've got the highest level of inequality in the world. People are making money from this economy. They're quite few. And unfortunately for them, they don't even understand that they can make a lot more money from this economy. They're not patient enough to know that. Look, if we didn't have this number of poor people, 93 million people now, 93 million people in extreme poverty, if they weren't 93 million, you guys who are rich will make a whole lot more money. Okay, to afford the things that you want to afford. So we were talking about the issue of, so for 5.3 trillion, you know, for example, the compliance rate on VAT is less than 20%. All right. In Ghana, do you know what they did? You know, I mean, of course, they were running at VAT of 17.5%. At some point, they abolished that one. They created what they call the VFRS, which is a VAT fixed rate system. They introduced a 3% sales tax, which everybody pays. You know what I'm saying? Now, they use that one to capture a lot of guys in the SMEs and the informal sector to also be part of this VAT system. South Africa's VAT alone is $25 billion that they get every year. From which is almost exactly our entire budget is got on VAT in South Africa alone. Look, you see, it's just like, you know, a parent can, sometimes, you know, our old parents will come and say, look at your friend, he's first every time. You too can do it. See, it's not, of course, you know, we've become different now. They say we can't talk to our children like that and all of that. But an economy can be talked to like that. We can challenge ourselves and say, look at what South Africa is doing. In terms of revenue generation, in terms of budgeting, we also can get this done. Look at what Angola is doing. Look at what Algeria is doing. Look at what Egypt is doing.
Let me take you on this. Let's talk about Oxfam a little bit. Oxfam brought out a couple of reports recently. We all know how the National Assembly budgeted 500 billion for social investment program. Oxfam said recently that our social investment program is the worst in the world as we speak today. And that also coincided with what the president's wife, because when the president's wife did say that I can't see what social investment program is in the life of the people, some people touted her and said, you know what, she doesn't know what she's talking about. But Oxfam is saying it's the worst in the world. We've seen social investment program. We've seen Bolsa Familia in Inacio Lula da Silva taking 20 million people out of poverty with evidence. What is wrong with our social investment program?
If you went to China, there was a reporter from this day that went to China and he did a report, which I read. It was shocking, about the poverty elevation scheme in China. Oh my God, it's profound, right? And in fact, the private sector, for those who like to, the private sector are the ones leading the charge in poverty eradication in China, and they're making money from it. So the government passes out.
How are they making money from it?
They do make money from it. So the government passes out whole regions and say, okay, this village, you go and sort these people out. The first thing they do, they build those buildings. Some of them are high-rise buildings. They relocate those villagers from all those places and put them in there. In one particular area that the reporter from this, I can't remember his name, went into, in that village, they built about 90,000 greenhouses for them. Each family had about 10 greenhouses. The agricultural productivity went up on a scale of 10. The problem with our SIP is that we can't see it linked to production, to productivity. Even what the president's wife was saying is a bit faulty itself, because she's actually worried about some people who should get 10,000 somewhere who didn't get the 10,000. So when you get the 10,000, max, even if you're very frugal, you spend it over 2 weeks or 3. And then what?
But they're saying the 5,000 is working, the trader money is working magic.
No, you see, the trader money for me is a mirage, because at the end of the day, okay, even if they were true to themselves, and, you give a guy 10,000 and he pays back, you give it 20,000. When you get to that limit of 100,000, the guy won't pay back anymore. And he has every reason not to pay back. You know what I'm saying?
Why?
He has every reason, because he can actually tell you where and when Nigeria has failed him and why he's not paying back the money. And again, that also presupposes, that scheme also presupposes that what Nigerians need is loans, That's one of the mistakes that many of our economists make, you think that what we need is finance. I'll direct you to the writings of Ha Jun Chan, professor at Cambridge, and he did this analysis to show that a lot of things that we have been touting, which I call zombie economics, things like microfinancing, things like finance, things like debt. That none of these things are never going to take Africa or Nigeria to the promised land.
I'm not holding brief for this administration, but it looks as though it's not only this administration. I'll give you an instance. 1993. 92, from 1990, in fact, if my memory serves me right, the president, the head of state, then Ibrahim Babangida, did invite Mohammed Yunus to this country that set up the Grameen Bank. And they tried replicating the Grameen Bank structure in this country. That's what led to the People's Bank of Nigeria, which he did flag off then by giving the first recipient of the People's Bank scheme in what is known to be Ajegunle as a 1990 her check of that money. But we saw what happens to People's Bank.
Absolutely.
So even with your loan structure, Tope, it looks like it doesn't work in this country.
Again, what I'm saying is, look, we need to actually, I would propose that one of the things I need to do, when we're talking about all these economic conferences, we shouldn't be having it in posh places like Eco Hotel and all of that, and Hilton. We should actually try and have some of those meetings in the ghettos, right? I don't know. Let people come in casual. Let's discuss the problem right there in the ghetto so that you see the visuals of what you're talking about, the problem you need to solve. That's the problem we need to solve. The problem with this country today is that our people are living in some subhuman state, which are unacceptable, and there's so many of them at that level. Look, loans are not their problem. They can't even manage the loans. You know what I'm saying? If we're talking about, even the banks losing so much money, I mean, look at what's happening with the Wando and all of those people. You know what I'm saying? And you now expect that those people who have been so impoverished and damaged and traumatized over time are going to have that integrity to always return your loan. It won't happen. So what we need to do is a lot more profound than just throwing money at the problem or giving them the cash and all of that, or creating banks. We're also very good at creating banks for everything. So, I mean, of recent, I know that some people are pushing the idea of creating an entertainment bank, an energy bank, a textile bank. So what you do is you find a nice place, you build a glistening new building, you get those sharp guys to go and walk in there, and in time you'll be hearing that they've lost so much money. So those things don't solve the problem.
Well, this administration has been trying hard to diversify the economy, and the figures sort of show how the non-oil sector has somewhat grown.
In fact, the first thing they need to do.
And the oil sector contracted. So you would give that to them, that perhaps they're making efforts in diversifying the economy. But I want to ask specifics of the sectors that should be focused on in this next administration.
First of all, you see, I would say that they haven't quite diversified, though, yeah, they make a lot of, they make some sound about that, but They haven't quite diversified. In fact, the first thing, the mental diversification we need to do.
Mental?
The first thing is the mental diversification to stop thinking about the economy from oil and non-oil. No.
Okay.
You know, because by making that statement, you have actually subsumed yourself to the idea that oil is the driver of the economy, has been the driver. We need to be able to ignore that oil and say, because again,
can we ignore the oil?
No, we can actually. We can, because mind you, the contribution to GDP is less than 20%, even though that 20% has, you know, all sorts of rollover effects around the economy and ricochet all over the place.
But its contribution to government expenditure is over 90%.
Exactly. No. That's the government revenue.
Revenue, yeah.
Foreign exchange revenue
is over 90%.
Over 90%.
So how do you balance that out?
How do you ignore that?
As a matter of fact, the truth is, mind you, that we don't have any input in that. You know, so the whole idea of crude oil, you know, and the reason why they're always looking for crude oil in everywhere is because it gives you the opportunity as people running government to sit in your office, you know, travel around the world, and from time to time you get these alerts coming in, but everything has a price. Everything has a price, you know, and that's why you see that reflecting in the debt level and the debt crisis that we're in right now. It is a crisis already of that pre-2005 proportion, you know. So if you want to, there's one thing about, however, again, there's also something about diversifying the economy and diversifying government revenue. So what they're trying to do, what they try to do most often is to diversify their government revenue. But diversifying the economy is a different mindset entirely. There are two or three ways of diversifying the economy. You can talk about spatial diversification of the economy to say that across the space called Nigeria, what is happening? You know, apart from what's going on in Kano, what's going on in Port Harcourt, what's going on in Borno State, what's going on in Ondo State, what's going on in Lagos. Spatial diversification. At the end of the day, you realize that diversification is actually, at the end of the day, about considerable self-reliance. The only way you would know about diversification of an economy is to study an economy that's diversified to know exactly what they do. So it also has to do a lot with understanding the fact that the economy needs to interact with itself. So one of the ways, look at textile, is a great idea what they're doing. I've proposed something on palm oil in the past, you know, looking at what Indonesia and all of this, whatever is it. So agric in general, first of all, think about what you will eat. Your people will eat. But, you know, there are some agric products that are also scalable.
We have to leave it there. Many thanks, Tope Fasua, for coming on the Morning Show today. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.